Whether that is wise economically, I'm not absolutely sure. There is a great deal of inequality in India, as the Oxfam report recently has emphasised. But it is clearly a political sweetener with an election imminent.
Okay, Andrew, just hold that thought for a minute. Andrew, just hold that thought for a minute. I'm going to let's just look at the politics of this a little bit, as he said. And then we'll come to the economics of it. Politically, okay, major rational. Now, not everyone is on the new regime. Most people are on the old regime. Although it seems from this that there's a clear signal the new regime should be. It makes sense to move. And now it actually makes sense. I think a lot of people will move to the new regime because it's economically attractive to actually do this. So that's message one. On the first part A of the speech, which is where you normally say, oh, we're going to do this for this section, this for this state, all of those election-related things, that there was some of it, but not too much.
Yes, I saw that. There was no geography, no election this year, except for the Karnataka bit, which raised a few halls, cheers and hooting and all that, except that Karnataka bit. But I think it was very good tactics. She decided this time I'm going to have good capex. I mean, to keep the growth momentum going, remain the fastest economy. But I'm also going to listen to this middle class. I mean, it's not a particular marine industry or something. It is 40 crore people and urban. And the thing about the middle class, it talks a lot. So it influences the other people also. So I think it was all for 35,000 crores, Vikram. Got all this done in 35,000 crores. I think it's pretty smart. I think it's a very good political, strategy that has been adopted.
Okay. Andrew, we obviously got some time to dissect the budget, so let's just do this step by step. The politics of it, the economics of it, the impact on the India story part of it. So going sort of step by step, let's just look at the politics, because you started that piece off. As P.N. Vijay is saying, 35,000 crore rupees, you've given something which the middle classes are going to jump onto. They may have forgotten other schemes, but they may remember, okay, our income tax has been cut and cut quite a lot. What else would you have been looking for from a political point of view? Or do you think that's enough? Just go with the middle classes right now.
Well, I think in terms of something which is sort of preparing the ground for the next nationwide election, this is the key thing. Whether it's socially or economically the best move, I think, is one thing. After all, the direct income tax burden on India's middle class is, in global terms, quite low, and there's an argument for higher personal taxation. But it's clearly a measure which is designed to it's designed to help the BJP in next year's election. She didn't really need to do a lot more because the BJP doesn't really face much of a challenge. So but nevertheless, there is a rhythm in the way in which these things are done, and across the world, broadly, the direct tax burden is reduced in the last budget before a general election. And that's exactly what Nirmala Sitharaman has done, and that's what I would have expected her to do.
Okay. Again, from the point of view of the other demands and the stuff that was coming in, nothing happened on capital gains tax, which is probably a relief. No major soak the rich measures came. Did that surprise you?
As he said, I don't think Modi needs to prove his credentials. I mean, nobody is saying that he's pampering the rich or anything like that. So I think he's looking at it more from wealth creation. These are the guys who have helped, especially if you see the new millionaires, they are from the IT sector, the startups. So he doesn't want a signal that we are back to the socialist days. Let things be. So I think there was no targeted hitting at the rich, which would not have got. India is a very peculiar country. The middle class is not angry with the upper classes or anything like that. There is no social conflict or something you see. People are not unhappy if some owner of Flipkart makes a lot of money. Even in normal life, I don't see that. They're held as role models for the kids to follow, work hard, you can also become this. So I think there is very little political mileage to be gained.
That's a really interesting political point, which, Andrew, I'm just going to toss that to you, and then let's turn to the economics of this. P.N. Vijay says, may well be right actually, that India is not necessarily a place today. Maybe it was the case earlier where, soak the rich got you a lot of political votes. He's saying it's not necessarily the case right now.
I think that's probably true. But nevertheless, as I understood what the finance minister was saying, we've now got a top income tax rate of 39%. That globally is very low. And there is really a problem in perception. This is not so much a political problem, but one of perception, that there is profound inequality in India, and it's getting worse. And I think one way of addressing that perception is to have higher direct tax rates on the very rich. And that clearly hasn't happened this time round.
All right, Andrew P. Vijay, just hold the thought for a minute, because it's a great pleasure to have with us Mr. Sanjeev Bajaj, who's the president of CII. Thank you so much for joining us, and just first of all, your overall take on the budget.
Thanks, Vikram, for having me here. Overall, a very balanced, growth-oriented yet prudent budget, where the finance minister has managed to support the economy through a 33% increase in public infra capex. This will have a force multiplier, creating new jobs, new opportunities, and help us with growth. And yet at the same time, stay within the fiscal deficit target set out. So 6.4% this year, going below 6 to 5.9% next year. So that's been very solid. We've seen a number of announcements to improve efficiency and productivity in the entire agri supply chain. I think that's very welcome, as also support from additional outlays towards climate change and the green transition period. Education, another significant area in which the government has announced support, and equally importantly in supporting the masses through rationalizing their personal income tax slabs and rates. So I would say overall a very balanced budget.
Now, I know you at CII and other industry associations spend a lot of time with the government, with the finance minister in the months leading up to it, with a list of what you would really like to see. So if you could check off for us, what were the main items on your agenda and how many of them were met today?
So I've already done that, and very happy to say that almost everything significant that we asked of has been checked off.
Such as, if you could just run us through the list.
So we actually suggested the 10 lakh crore public infra, the 33% growth.
Okay, the
so
infrastructure spending
so
is
that is done. The rationalizing of the tax rates for personal income tax, especially at the lower end. So that is done.
Yeah.
The efficiency improvement on the agri side, that is done. We've talked about new job creation and focus on education and health, and we've seen announcements in both these areas. So if you actually see a whole bunch of recommendations being accepted, God is always in the execution.
Yeah, and sometimes in the fine print. I mean, this is a very short speech, which is great. It's almost surprising to have a 1.5 hour speech.
The bureaucrat's revenge is in the tail, right?
Yeah, but sometimes it's the fine print. So when it's a very short speech, you sometimes worry a little bit what's in the fine print, which I guess you haven't seen either.
Not seen yet. We will go through it with a fine comb soon.
Yeah, retrospective tax was in the fine print. I remember that.
There are two things which I would have liked to see, which I didn't see. One was healthcare spending.
Yeah.
We've talked, especially COVID has brought out the very poor infrastructure in primary health services all over the country. I don't think enough was said about it. The second is ease of doing business. Of course, that ranking is no longer there. We expected something positive on resolution of contracts. There was something about e-courts which I couldn't just follow. But remember, it's about 8 years it takes to have a civil money recovery suit settled in this country. This is what really brought us down. And the NCLT process is not working as well as we thought.
So there's always an unfinished agenda.
Yeah, and I thought we could see more of that.
Is that one of the areas that you still are hoping it's work in progress, the entire ease of doing business? It's obviously, it's ostensibly a priority, but obviously it's a lot more still needs to be done to make India a good place to do business.
That ends up very much being a moving target. And the finance minister announced the number of changes in rules and regulations that they had done. She's also announced an entire review of the regulations across the regulators. I think that's a very strong positive move, including public recommendations being taken into account. Let's also see the entire support to states being given and encouragement for creating a viable muni bond environment as well. the state capex, support towards that, incentivizing it with the interest-free 50-year-old loan, but it all has to be consumed in the next 1 year. Again, very positive move.
So if you had to now go on pressing, the budgets are not one-off exercises anymore. A lot gets done the rest of the year. And you as the president of CI will continue to have a lot of work ahead of you. What would be the main items you're going to be pressing the government for? Would it be ease of doing business? Would it be other pending items that are remaining to be sorted out?
Execution on a large number of these suggestions or these plans. Continued focus on decriminalizing business rules and improving ease of doing business, because each of these will provide tailwinds to everything that is being suggested today in the budget.
Right. On the question of one of the other things that was done on income, on taxation, right? Of course, we've gone past, I think not too much tinkering, at least we could see, on indirect taxes. The fact that she reduced the highest slab 1 year before an election, I think a lot of people's eyebrows were raised because it is counterintuitive. Is that in a sense a signal that stay in India, keep investing in India, keep your companies out here, we will not punish wealth creators?
I very much believe so. This government has always said that creating successful businesses and in the right ways making money is good. It's good for the economy. That's not a bad thing to do. And yes, it was a pleasant surprise. It also is once again a way to keep comparing us with the other competitive economies to see that how do we stay aligned, if at all more efficient.
Right. When it comes to the other major highlight of the budget, which is infrastructure, 10 lakh crores for you, is that, it seems to be a new theory that this government is saying, we don't care how much we have to spend on infrastructure, it is good, it's what the country needs, and it crowds in private sector.
It's equal a recognition to say that while the revival period is over for the economy, we have to now set ourselves on very strong growth. There is a significant hope for private sector investment as well, but this ends up complementing that at a period where it is required. Yep.
All right, Mr. Bajaj, I know you have a very busy afternoon ahead of you. Thank you so much for having joined us. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Great. We have Andrew still with us. Andrew, quick reaction to what you heard.
I'm really struck that the CII is saying that they've got everything that they wanted from this budget. Normally, you'd get a reaction which is good, but they've said they've got everything they wanted. I don't think I've ever heard those words from an employers' organisation, certainly here in the UK or in India, immediately after the budget. So that demonstrates that the finance minister delivered a very business-friendly budget. I still have a question about whether really more should be done about income inequalities, and whether there's been very much in the budget which addresses one of the most profound problems, which is urban unemployment. I didn't hear very much about that in the budget.
Andrew, thanks for joining us. Andrew, I'm just going to go quickly now from person to person getting reactions from this. Mr. Veera Sadhwani is joining us, Vice Chairman, Managing Director, Blue Star Limited. Mr. Advani, short speech, short budget, interesting things in personal taxation, interesting things on infrastructure spending. What caught your eye?
Good morning, Vikram. Thank you for having me. I want to talk about exporters and international trade. You know, we had 5 asks. There was to make sure that the RODTEP financing was adequate, that export finance would be looked at, that there would be a push for export infrastructure so that we could be more competitive, that India could participate more in GVCs and global value chains, and that R&D investment would get a focus. So, you know, out of all those 5 asks, we've got several of them that I'm very pleased about. Most important is the rationalization of import duties. That will really help us integrate into global value chains. We saw some mention in mobile phones, shrimp feed, lab-based diamonds, open cells for televisions. I'm sure as the details come out, there'll be more. So that's a big, big help.
I'm just going to interrupt you there for a minute. And
yes,
just come back to you in 3 or 4 minutes.
Sure.
All right, Mr. Advani, thanks so much for joining that. I'll just come back to you, but we do have Mr. Sinha joining us, Chairman of BCG. It's such a pleasure to have you with us here. It was an interesting speech. I just wanted to get your take on it. Short, sweet, and yet there was a reasonable amount in there.
I actually think it is consistent, and it has allowed for predictability for business. For the last 4 years, we've been building on the same themes. Infrastructure. You could see the accent on green. You could see the financial sector getting attention. You could see agriculture. You could see the welfare measures for the poor. So it's been consistent over the 4 years, which has made business planning a lot easier. I love a budget which is uneventful. Of course, this one has a little bit of sweets with it because the direct taxes have been reduced.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point you make. You like a budget that doesn't have much in it. A 1.5-hour speech, a few basic points, read the financial bills for more detail, including duty changes. In many ways, you're saying that helps in continuity. A budget should not be a tamasha, it should not be a major event.
Completely, because it allows me to plan. It allows a business to predict and plan for 5 years and 10 years. So with infrastructure, productivity increasing, we know what we need to do. And that's the best thing over the last 4 years, the consistency and the clarity with which the government has been moving forward.
So the interesting part is you want budgets that are boring. If all the hard work has been done and the framework is there, the ship is sailing in the right direction. Now, please don't tamper with it. Let the ship keep sailing, right?
Exactly.
Provided the right things have been done.
Exactly right. I couldn't have said it better.
Okay, so what has been done right so far to get the ship in the right direction? And what is it that still needs to be done? Because that's what needs to be checked off the list.
So look, we are in a very uncertain world today. The 6.4% fiscal deficit was met. Next year, 5.9% has been restated, and we are going to 4.5%, which has been said. We are the fastest growing economy in the world with the lowest inflation amongst the G7. So it's a great situation. You could have imagined the elections are coming, let's be populist. None of that. It was clear, it was continuing on a path with infrastructure spending continuing, education and health continuing to get focus. So if you really look at it, what do we need? We need to fix our infrastructure. We've been doing a lot on the hard, and now we are starting to focus on the soft. And we are an economy which is growing. And so we should not mess around with what we've got going right now. Let's keep it going.
Don't mess around, keep things going. And infrastructure spending, are you happy with that number?
Yes, I was.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
It was great that you came and
joined
us. Right. 1 second. Mr. Vijay, just turning to you on your reaction.
What he said?
Yeah, on what he said. I think, Mr. Sinha, you can go. I know we're going to be shuffling people in and out of here just for a while. Yeah.
I think he got it bang on. Business wants predictability. You know, a predictable bad law is better than a law that keeps changing. You know, because planning and a person like BCG would obviously know the value of predictability. Yeah. And I think gang on, the priorities have been the same. You know, it's been expected. It was boring, but you know, let it be boring. What does it matter? We have got T20 matches anyway. So, but one thing, the other gentleman from London, at that point, probably, I feel if Modi comes back to power, as everyone thinks he will attack the inequality issue. Because that's not something that's done, it's not something that's done in the election year budget type of thing, you know. The inequality issue, how does he address it? It would require, you know...
It's just that logically, look, I think we've just heard from CI and BCG, and that's as big as it gets when it comes to India Inc. They are smiling, they're saying this is what we want.
Yeah.
Right, you've got the president of CI and the chairman of BCG, both have joined us and told us what they think. So India Inc. is saying, all right, this is what was good. But doing it after the election as opposed to before the election means that Mr. Modi is obviously really confident about winning the election.
I feel so. In a very roundabout way, I got the same thought, Vikram. Yeah. He doesn't need to be populist. You know, for him it's business as usual.
He thinks I'm popular enough, I don't need to be populist. Let me not worry about the election too much. It'll happen anyway.
You know, but another thing, Vikram, complacency is not good. don't you get the feeling, wee bit feeling, that people are getting a bit complacent in India?
About the India economy? Perhaps, Pat. But let me take a break right now. There's a lot more to be discussed on all of this. We have a bunch of guests coming in to join us. Let's just slip into a really quick break, and then when we come back, let's try and figure out some of the fine print. Now, we're going to start seeing the fine print. Remember, the speeches are now going to be published, the budget documents are out. We'll start dissecting that a little bit when we come back in just a couple of minutes.
We On, now available on Spotify.
Electronics. As a result of various initiatives of the government, including phased manufacturing program, mobile phone production in India has increased from 5.8 crore units valued at about 18,900 crore in 2014-15 to 31 crore units valued at 2,75,000 crore in the last financial year. To further deepen domestic value addition in manufacturing of mobile phones, I propose to provide relief to customs duty. I propose to provide relief in customs duty on import of certain parts and inputs like camera lens, and continue the concessional duty on lithium-ion cells for batteries for another year. Electronics. As a result of various initiatives of the government, including phased manufacturing program, mobile phone production in India has increased from 5.8 crore units valued at about 18,900 crore in 2014-15 to 31 crore units valued at 2,75,000 crore in the last financial year. To further deepen domestic value addition in manufacturing of mobile phones, I propose to provide relief to customs duty. I propose to provide relief in customs duty on import of certain parts and inputs like camera lens, and continue the concessional duty on lithium-ion cells for batteries for another year. Vehicle replacement is an important continuing policy, replacing the old replacing, absolutely, thank you. Replacing old polluting vehicles. Maybe applicable, right? Renewable energy evacuation. The interstate transmission system for evacuation and grid integration of 13 gigawatt renewable energy from Ladakh will be constructed with investment of 20,700 crore, including central support of 8,300 crores. In the 75th year of our independence, the world has recognized the Indian economy as a bright star. Our current year's economic growth is estimated to be at 7%. It is notable that this is the highest among all the major economies. This is in spite of the massive slowdown globally caused by COVID-19 and the war. The Indian economy is therefore on the right track. The per capita income has more than doubled to 1.97 lakh rupees. In these 9 years, the Indian economy has increased in priorities of this budget. The budget adopts the following 7 priorities. They complement each other and act as the Saptarishi guiding us through the Amrit Kal. Inclusive development, reaching the last mile, infrastructure and investment, unleashing the potential, green growth, youth power, and financial lab-grown diamonds. Lab-grown diamonds is a technology and innovation driven emerging sector with high employment potential. These environment friendly diamonds, which have optically and chemically the same properties as natural diamonds, to encourage indigenous production of LGD, lab-grown diamond seeds and machines, and to reduce import dependency, a research and development grant will be provided to one of the IITs for 5 years. Honorable Speaker, sir, the capital investment outlay is being increased steeply for the third year in a row by 33% to 10 lakh crores, which would be which would be 3.3% of GDP. This will almost be 3 times the outlay made in 2019-20. In the drought-prone central regions of Karnataka, central assistance of 5,300 crore will be given to Upper Bhadra project to provide sustainable micro irrigation and filling up of surface tanks for drinking water. Electronics, as a result of various initiatives of the government, including phased manufacturing program, mobile phone production in India has increased from 5.8 crore units valued at about 18,900 crore in 2014-15 to 31 crore units valued at 2,75,000 crore in the last financial year. To further deepen domestic value addition in manufacturing of mobile phones, I propose to provide relief to customs duty. I propose to provide relief in customs duty on import of certain parts and inputs like camera lens, and continue the concessional duty on lithium ion cells for batteries for another year. Centers of Excellence for Artificial Intelligence. For realizing the vision of Make AI in India and Make AI Work for India, 3 centers of excellence for artificial intelligence will be set up in top educational institutions. Leading industry players will partner in conducting interdisciplinary research, develop cutting-edge applications, and scalable problem solutions in the areas of agriculture, health, and sustainable cities. This will galvanize an effective AI ecosystem and nurture quality human resources in the field. Coming to 2023-24, the total receipts other than borrowings and the total expenditure are estimated at 27.2 lakh crores and 45 lakh crores respectively. The net tax receipts are estimated at 23.3 lakh crores. The fiscal deficit is estimated to be 5.9% of the GDP. Now I come to what everyone is waiting for. Personal income tax. I have 5 major announcements to make in this regard. Currently, those with income up to 5 lakh do not pay any income tax in both old and new regimes. I propose to increase the rebate limit to 7 lakhs in the I propose to increase the rebate limit to 7 lakh in the new tax regime. Thus, persons in the new tax regime with income up to 7 lakhs will not have to pay any tax at all. The second proposal relates to middle class individuals. I had introduced in the year 2020 the new personal income tax regime with 6 income slabs starting from 2.5 lakh. I propose to change the tax structure in this regime by reducing the number of slabs to 5 and increasing the tax exemption limit to 3 lakhs. The new tax rates are 0 to 3 lakh, nil. 3 to 6 lakhs, 5%. 6 to 9 lakhs, 10%. 9 to 12 lakh, 15%. 12 to 15 lakhs, 20%. And above 15 lakhs, 30%. This will provide major relief to all taxpayers in the new regime. Honorable Speaker, sir, the capital investment outlay is being increased steeply for the third year in a row by 33% to 10 lakh crores, which would be which would be 3.3% of GDP. This will almost be 3 times the
highlights. Now, we're going to continue to get your reactions. Rakesh Mittal now joins us. It's a pleasure to have you with us. You've got a smile on your face, but then you always have a smile after every budget. Is this a particularly wide smile because you didn't hear anything that you didn't want to hear and you did hear some good things?
Well, I would say certainly yes. I would like to compliment the Finance Minister for a growth-oriented and a very, very focused budget on inclusive growth. Clearly, the 7 priority sectors which he talked about covered the entire gambit of what the industry was looking forward to, what the middle class wanted, and more importantly, the segments of society who need a very, very supporting and helping hand. Having said that, containing the fiscal deficit at 6.4%, in spite of all the pressures, where the government had to go and do their external borrowing, given the Russia-Ukraine war, supply chain disruptions, the inputs pricing moving up. I mean, clearly that was something which was very, very difficult for the government and the industry as a whole. And also giving a roadmap of 5.9% fiscal deficit next year. I think that is something which I believe the government will be able to
So she's
achieve
a certain path of consolidation, but at 10 lakh crore spending on infrastructure, that for many people would be one of the highlights, along with whatever happened on personal income tax. Are you glad she's done that? Because that means at a time when the world could be slipping into recession, that amount of spending may keep India on the growth path.
I would certainly say yes. I think this was something which we have seen during the last over a decade on the focus on infrastructure. I mean, not only roads, airports, ports, heliports and whatnot. Even in this budget, 50 additional airports and heliports will be revived, which has helped the domestic travelers to really travel and go into tier 2, tier 3 cities where it was very, very hard to reach. Yeah. Having said that, this will certainly spur growth and the focus on tourism, which she talked about, which I believe is something where domestic and international tourism are both very important to the country. Not only creating jobs, employment opportunities, but I think more importantly, I believe with all this spending which the government will do, which will keep the growth and the employment generation on. But more importantly, private sector also having spent about 4.5 lakh crore on capex this year, still yet not finished, a quarter to go. I believe it is time for the private sector to unleash their animal spirits now. The government has laid down the roadmap. They are supporting in any which way, whether it is the PLI for manufacturing sector, whether we look at urban revival growth, 80,000 crore on affordable housing, money being spent on DBT, 47 lakh youth on tourism. So all this is a great positive.
You'd like to see a private sector spending.
Yes, the private sector is already starting to move. Clearly, we see, and I believe that the next few years, few decades is something where we need to work together.
Rakesh Mittal, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure speaking to you and getting your snap reactions. I know you have to head somewhere else, but just give us a sec. Dr. Suyash Bhatt now joining us from Dubai. Let's start getting an international perspective from around the world on the budget. Dr. Bhatt, what was your sense of the budget that you've just heard?
Good afternoon. I believe this is a true budget for the VUCA world as we see. There's so much of volatility, uncertainty, and also a chaos going on. And here we have a government which has come up with a very clear, direction of cutting the rate of income tax, which will boost the spending from the common man's perspective. Also, at the same time, if everyone says 2023 is the year of recession, how do you beat recession? By spending money. So capital expenditure, and also what I think the global community here is impressed is the kind of confidence that you're seeing, that when would you cut your revenue, sources of revenue, when you're so strong about especially income tax and other elements. Only when you're strong that you would be able to recover this from other taxes, indirect taxes that you're levying. So that confidence, I think, is very important. And there are a few things that I think people are taking notice of, especially the green growth that is being spoken about. I would like to highlight a little bit on that, because I think here in UAE, especially, there's a COP28 in 2 years. So a lot of emphasis is given on this, and India talking about giving a credit, green credit program for changing or bringing that behavioral change. So that's a real commitment towards sustainability and growth at the same time, by bringing that notification under the Environment Protection Act. Also, the way the government has tried to commit money for the housing schemes that are there, that would also solve a good amount of problem, especially from a infrastructure point of view. So as an economician, if you ask me, how do you beat recession if the so-called recession is maybe around the corner? One is try to spend and give money more in the hands of people. Second, do a capital expenditure. So both the government is trying to announce. And when you spend on housing, building infrastructure, you actually distributing money at a lowest level, where people who don't have skills but are on daily wages, they would also get an opportunity to earn and participate in this growth story that we are talking about. Also, it would avert a big ground level impact of recession and also inflation that we are seeing across the world. So I think I would say it's a true budget for the VUCA world, where it is trying to address all these four complexities of that the world is facing, by trying to address each of these elements. Also, at the same time, when we talk about capital expenditure, the government is also trying to keep in check the fiscal deficit. So that is also something commendable, where you'd see other governments trying to go just and print money. So I think that's a good fiscal prudence also seen in this government.
Fiscal prudence also kept in mind. Dr. Bhatt, just stay on with us for a while. I just want to go across to Vijay Bharech, who's director at Deloitte India for personal tax. Now, we just heard, and you're going to hear this theme from us for a while, two major thrusts of this: spend money, get the economy going, invest in infrastructure. And we certainly heard a lot of that in this budget. But the second part of it was put money into the hands of the middle classes. And there were some reasonably major changes in personal income tax, which I'm going to now get Vijay Bharech to explain to us. Vijay, I know that the fine print is not all out there right now, and we need to look at it in some detail. But at the end of it, it seems a very clear signal from Nirmala Sitharaman. We are going to be cutting taxes for you. We are going to make it a bit easier. We're going to increase the exemption limit. But you need to move to the new regime. To really get the benefits of this, move to the new regime, and there are goodies for you there.
Yes, definitely. So the idea is to not the selving of the tax base, because the way they are moving to the new tax regime, they are giving the rebate to the new tax regime guys, so that they have to file the tax return while they are ending up paying no taxes. So idea is definitely that. So first, as he mentioned from the personal tax perspective, 5 major announcements he did. One was the announcement regarding the rebate, which is there today under the regular tax regime. So today, under the regular tax regime, those with the taxable income of up to 5 lakhs, they end up paying no taxes. But this was not available under the new tax regime. So now this will be available, and this will be available to those with the taxable income of 7 lakhs. So that is a huge relief. And further, just to add to that, he also mentioned that standard deduction will also be available under the new tax regime, which is 50,000, which every salary taxpayer get their deduction under the regular tax regime, which was not there under the new tax regime. So now with this, if you ask me, someone with a taxable income of 7.5 lakhs today, okay, they will end up paying no taxes under the new tax regime. So kind of a tax saving of 39,000 under the new tax regime for those people. Now, for say someone at the 15 lakhs, because he also second steps he took around the rationalizing the tax slab. So today the tax slab under the new tax regime is having 6 different slabs. So that he has brought down to 5. Okay, and the impact is that those who are running at the 15 lakhs level, they are going to save a taxes of around 54,600. So now that 54,600, it is coming because of one is the rationalization of the tax slab, where he has introduced something between 9 to 12 lakhs, 12 to 15 lakhs. Because of that, and introducing this 50,000 of standard deduction for the new tax regime. So definitely, as he mentioned, new
so
tax
regime. If I could just ask you, Vijay. Yeah, Vijay, just to understand the upshot of this is somebody just saying, what is the main highlight of this? Would you advise anybody now to say you don't really have a choice? The old regime is still an option if you really want to do it, but for virtually everybody now, the new tax regime makes more sense. Would that be a way of summarizing everything that we've just heard?
Not necessarily, because still under the new tax regime, you don't get the exemption for, say, house rent allowance. You don't get the deduction for ATC, which is there for 1,50,000. You don't get the deduction for medical insurance. So all that deduction and exemptions can run into lakhs, right? So 1,50,000 of ATC, ATD, which is towards the medical insurance premium, is around 50,000 for the family and for the parents. So 2 lakhs over there, you claim a, say, house rent allowance exemption of 1.5, 2 lakhs, depending upon the rental period. So all this sums up to 3-4 lakhs. So now this delta between the regular and the new tax regime, yes, definitely it has reduced. Earlier, it was somewhere around 1,32,000, those who are at the taxable income level of 15 lakhs opting for regular tax regime versus new tax regime. Now the delta has gone to 78,000. Definitely, it is a good move, 60,000 difference, somewhere around 54,000 difference is there. But still, I will have to evaluate whether I'm good at claiming HRA exemption, ATC deduction, my medical insurance deduction. So straightforward, you will not be able to conclude, I would say that.
Okay, so just hold that thought. Andrew, I know you've been looking at the taxations here in India also. Would you have liked perhaps further simplification to make it even clear-cut? Maybe just go in for one regime. Don't give people the choice. I mean, choice is good if you are at a Starbucks, but not necessarily with your taxation. Do you think maybe further simplification could have been there, so we wouldn't have to ask the director of Deloitte India as to which is a better idea?
Well, I've been listening to what your colleague from Deloitte has been saying, and it is, from afar, it is mesmerizingly complex that you have two parallel systems, and people can, as I understand it, opt to be old or new in the system of taxation that they have for personal direct taxes. I mean, clearly, the finance minister is encouraging everybody to move on to the new scheme, but it does seem remarkably complex. I mean, from my perspective, unnecessarily complex. But it was a very confident budget. I was really struck. I mean, you were saying it was very short. It was 90 minutes. There were times when you just wondered how long. But it was very confidently delivered. And Nirmala Sitharaman over the years has really grown into the role. And she comes across now as a very assured finance minister. And one of your other guests was saying that actually this government doesn't need to be populist, because although there's a nationwide election looming, there isn't very much of a nationwide political threat to it. And I'm very struck as well by how warmly the budget has been received by the CII and by business leaders. This has given them exactly what they wanted. It's given them an emphasis on infrastructure, on green growth, no sharp change of course, and attention paid to the middle class.
All right, Andrew. Although to be fair, I have to say that sometimes even if the budget is disastrous, here at CII on television, most people are on streaming platforms. Most people do say it's not that bad. But this time I think they're genuinely, even when the camera is off, they're sounding genuinely happy, which is a change. Could the taxation have been simplified further? I mean, I'm sitting and trying to take notes from Vijay, and I feel like going into an ad break right now and saying, can you please tell us some more about it?
And you need a director from Deloitte to tell you about the regime.
That's exactly what I said. So it should be. Could it have been made even simpler?
I think the chartered accountants must be very happy. They're still not out of.
They're going to get Mukesh Bhutani in.
Yes, Mukesh will be happy.
Saying,
yes. Let's keep it complicated, okay? We want employment.
But in the right direction, it could have been simpler.
Really, and at least one sentence she could have said, from next year onwards, we will be only on the new tax regime or something like that.
Interesting.
Some sunset for the old regime. That would have been very nice to hear.
I know I have to slip into a break right now, but Vijay, before I allow you to go, do you think that's something that could still happen? It's a sunset, it's a process, and next year she said, okay, now we're going to really simplify this, forget the old scheme, we only have the new scheme, and it's nice and simple and easy for everyone.
Yeah, that's what you expect to move towards the easy tax administration. But yeah, we'll have to wait and watch for that, because still there are taxpayers. And interesting thing will be, after all this rationalization of slabs and standard reduction under the new tax regime, how many of the taxpayers are moving from the regular to new now? Because as of now, there is no data available, but what was there in the press, not many of the taxpayers were opting for the new tax regime. So with this, definitely yes, they will move towards that. But looking at the percentage, I think the government may take a call whether the sunset will be given to the old tax regime or not very soon or later.
All right, Vijay Baraj, thank you so much for joining us. Vijay, thanks for being with us as well. We've got to step into a break right now. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue to get reactions. We'll quickly continue to analyze various aspects of Budget 2023. Do stay with us.
Now I come to what everyone is waiting for. Personal income tax. I have 5 major announcements to make in this regard. Currently, those with income up to 5 lakh do not pay any income tax in both old and new regimes. I propose to increase the rebate limit to 7 lakhs in the I propose to increase the rebate limit to 7 lakh in the new tax regime. Thus, persons in the new tax regime with income up to 7 lakhs will not have to pay any tax at all. The second proposal relates to middle class individuals. I had introduced in the year 2020 the new personal income tax regime with 6 income slabs starting from 2.5 lakh. I propose to change the tax structure in this regime by reducing the number of slabs to 5 and increasing the tax exemption limit to 3 lakhs. The new tax rates are 0 to 3 lakh, nil. 3 to 6 lakhs, 5%. 6 to 9 lakhs, 10%. 9 to 12 lakh, 15%. 12 to 15 lakhs, 20%. And above 15 lakhs, 30%. This will provide major relief to all taxpayers in the new priorities of this budget. The budget adopts the following 7 priorities. They complement each other and act as the Saptarishi guiding us through the Amrit Kal. Inclusive development, reaching the last mile, infrastructure and investment, unleashing the potential, green growth, youth power, and financial sector. Renewable energy evacuation. The interstate transmission system for evacuation and grid integration of 13 gigawatt renewable energy from Ladakh will be constructed with investment of 20,700 crore, including central support of 8,300 crores. In the 75th year of our independence, the world has recognized the Indian economy as a bright star. Our current year's economic growth is estimated to be at 7%. It is notable that this is the highest among all the major economies. This is in spite of the massive slowdown globally caused by COVID-19 and the war. The Indian economy is therefore on the right track. The per capita income has more than doubled to 1.97 lakh rupees. In these 9 years, the Indian economy has increased in size from being 10th to 5th largest in the world. Electronics. As a result of various initiatives of the government, including phased manufacturing program, mobile phone production in India has increased from 5.8 crore units valued at about 18,900 crore in 2014-15 to 31 crore units valued at 2,75,000 crore in the last financial year. To further deepen domestic value addition in manufacturing of mobile phones, I propose to provide relief to customs duty. I propose to provide relief in customs duty on import of certain parts and inputs like camera lens, and continue the concessional duty on lithium ion cells for batteries for another year. Vehicle replacement is an important continuing policy, replacing the old political, replacing, absolutely, thank you. Replacing old polluting vehicles may be applicable, right? Lab-grown diamonds. Lab-grown diamonds is a technology and innovation driven emerging sector with high employment potential. These environment friendly diamonds, which have optically and chemically the same properties as natural diamonds, to encourage indigenous production of LGD, lab-grown diamond seeds and machines, and to reduce import dependency, a research and development grant will be provided to one of the IITs for 5 years. Honorable Speaker, sir, the capital investment outlay is being increased steeply for the third year in a row by 33% to 10 lakh crores, which would be which would be 3.3% of GDP. This will almost be 3 times the outlay made in 2019-20. In the drought-prone central regions of Karnataka, central assistance of 5,300 crore will be given to Upper Bhadra project to provide sustainable micro irrigation and filling up of surface tanks for drinking water. Centers of excellence for artificial intelligence. For realizing the vision of Make AI in India and Make AI work for India, 3 centers of excellence for artificial intelligence will be set up in top educational institutions. Leading industry players will partner.
That loophole seems to have been plugged now. It will be taxed at short-term capital gains at applicable rates. And also life insurance policies with an aggregate premium of 5 lakhs and more, their maturities will be taxable. So this is some of the fine print that is now starting to come out. And I think the market-linked debentures is particularly important. Keep an eye on this. P. N. Vijay, before you leave us, a quick reaction on the stock market, about 1% up right now, 750 points.
I'm happy with that. I'll tell you why. Because you and I talk about the devil in the detail. The stock market is the first one to pick it up. You know, very, very quickly. You remember that Pranab Mukherjee's budget? Yeah, probably you and I were together at that time. Till 110, the Sensex was up 400 points. At that time, Sensex was only 10-12,000. Yeah. 400 points. He talked about GAR and he talked about that other tax. You remember? Those two. And by 10,
sometimes the markets didn't pick it up. I remember one infamous moment with retrospective tax, where somebody actually passed it to me, sitting around a table, and they passed it to me and said, "Have you seen that clause?" And we said, "What does this mean?"
The market fell like a ton of bricks.
It can be quite scary. So you're relieved.
I'm
if there's
relieved.
Something in the fine print, the market sort of picked it up.
Caught it. Yeah.
Okay, so he's relieved. Andrew Whitehead, any final thoughts before you leave us?
A lot in it for the middle class, quite dramatic cuts in personal direct taxation and in income tax. So politically very confident. And I just wonder, though, whether more could have been done to address inequality, to address failings in healthcare, and the plight of the tens of millions of urban unemployed. I didn't spot all that much in the speech about that.
All right, Andrew, thanks a lot for joining us. Well, we have Anshuman Magazine with us now, who can dissect and understand and interpret for us everything that we need to understand when it comes to housing. Now, I was just saying, 10 lakh rupees is the cap now for capital gains. You can't really buy a mansion and say, I'm not going to pay capital gains tax. But otherwise, are you satisfied with whatever has happened?
There was a long list taxed on housing and real estate. None of them have been mentioned.
You're not looking as happy as some of the other people.
But I must say that where the benefit will real estate will come in with all the infrastructure investment which is happening. Besides the 10 lakh crore fund, there's also an urban infrastructure fund which is for tier 2, tier 3 towns. They talked about tourism. They talked about so the benefit to the real estate will be there, but it will be through all the infrastructure investment, which is very positive. The allocation has increased significantly. It's still 3.3% of GDP. It should be even higher than that. But it's a start, like the FM mentioned, 33% increase in allocation infrastructure. That will certainly make a big difference to the real estate industry, But specific in housing, all the tax exemptions and everything, they were not mentioned,
Okay, so you haven't got some of that. Are you concerned also when it comes to personal income tax? A lot of people are going to be presumably moving to the new tax regime. But that means they don't necessarily get the benefits of some of those housing-related exemptions that they have.
Absolutely. That was in the list, that, how do we increase 1.5 lakh rupees exemption you get on your interest. That has not gone up. The request was to go for that to go up to 4 lakhs. So all those exemptions are not there in housing. And my only concern is with the interest rates going up, and with the price of housing going up, there was to be some kind of a stimulation required to increase consumption. But overall, again, I believe the infrastructure side has been very, very positive. And again, tourism and education, everything else which is skilling is a big one, will make a difference to even the real estate sector.
All right, Anshuman, thanks for joining us. Just like to welcome a couple more international guests to give us an international flavor on this. Lekha Chakrabarti now joining us, Professor NIPF, and Nilima Jain also with us, Deputy Director and Senior Fellow at the Vadvani Chain in US-India Policy Studies. Thank you both so much for joining us. Lekha, we've been sort of trying to see what the fine print is, but your overall reaction to the budget so far?
Yeah, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Please carry on.
Oh, yeah. That emphasis on the capital expenditure, that is much expected. And, it's a budget which is beyond growth paradigm. It's focusing on the human development. But the confusion is, where is the money coming from? Because on one side, we have announced that on the taxation side, the populist policies. On the other side, the fiscal deficit is on the part of fiscal consolidation. And we have pegged the fiscal deficit to 5.9. So we need to see the details of market borrowings to get into the details. And the tax buoyancy, we of course look into the fiscal marksmanship. What is the budget estimate and what is the revised estimate? We need to see the numbers. I need to see the budget at a glance at least. But my hunch is there is no serious announcement about the avenues of the revenue stability. But at the same time, the populist measures are announced with food security for another 1 year, and the women's empowerment. Of course, it's welcome because it's a beyond GDP paradigm or beyond GDP emphasis in the budget. That's welcome, especially the peer monitoring models of the access to the credit of women to the formal credit infusion and the credit system. These are welcome. And the digital infrastructure, the emphasis given on that against a backdrop of the G20. So these are welcome, but my hunch is, where's the money coming from? So we need to know the details of the expenditure side, and then only we will be able to know how the fiscal consolidation part is going to be, that by 2025-26, we are going to reach the 4.5. But had the emphasis been not on the fiscal consolidation, but substantiating the high fiscal deficit or high debt by linking into the beyond growth paradigm and the capital infrastructure, I would have been able to understand this narrative a little better.
All right. Lekha Chakrabarti, I know you have to leave us. So one last quick comment from you on that. When you're saying where will the money come from, presumably this is a bet on growth, right? If you keep on growing, you can be the fastest growing economy in the world, get it from 6.5 up to 6.9, something like that, spend on that infrastructure. The money will come because there'll be tax buoyancy, and that is something which we have seen in the past, including, by the way, cutting some of the tax rates. Sometimes the Laffer curve does work in India, as we saw with corporate tax.
Oh, sure. I do agree to the point that, we need to emphasize the threshold ratio deficit to GDP, not only the numerator deficit, but we need to see the denominator. And I agree with you that if you are able to widen the denominator, the growth, it can have its own right repercussions on reduction in the threshold ratio of the GDP to the fiscal deficit to GDP. That point is welcome, but at the same time, we are keeping the deficits very high, and the narrative is closely linked to the capex, and there is a lag in its impact on the growth. So that we need to wait and see, and the emphasis on the capital. Yeah.
All right. Lekha Chakrabarti, thank you so much for joining us. Nilima, I'm just going to come to you in a minute, but I have Mukesh Bhutani with me, and this is roughly the time every year after the budget that I look at Mukesh and say, what's in the fine print that we should all be now really worrying about?
Let me just first answer the first question on where the money is going to come from. I think she is making an assumption that the tax buoyancy she experienced in 22-23 will continue over 2 fiscal years, because without that, for her to be able to meet 5.9% next year and take it to 4.5% a year after that is going to be a task. I think last year's budget, she probably, and as we had discussed and debated it, underestimated the tax collection target. She's gained in 2 ways. One, she was conservative last year. This year she is aggressive in my view, because she is betting growth on a host of factors. One, as you correctly pointed out, consumption. There hasn't been a lot of giveaway by the government because of the rates in tax changes. She gave away 40,000, which included corporate tax as well, which is not much in the overall context. But she's betting a lot that the infrastructure spend of last year, which was 60%, this year again 30%, and she talked about tripling it over a 4-year period from 1920 onwards. I think she's betting a lot that capex will generate productive assets, and that will have a multiplier effect on employment, on demand creation, so on and so forth. I think it's a safe bet in my view, because the fact still remains that amongst the large emerging economies, India would be probably doing very well. To your question, what does the fine print say? I think there is a lot in the fine print on direct tax side. One, in terms of simplification, addressing the dispute resolution. There is now a delegated power from the commissioner to the deputy commissioner to deal with disputes that arise for small individuals and classes of taxpayers where the amount at dispute is not high. There is an exemption limit for government employees on leave encashment, which she has taken from 3 lakh to 25 lakhs. Of course, that had not been revised for over a decade. Now, all of these measures, there is a standard deduction for people with salaries up to 15 lakh rupees. What is happening is that she's betting that all of these is going to put more money in the hands of the marginalized and low taxpayers. Even for high taxpayers, she's modified the highest surcharge and reducing the effective tax rate from 42 to 39%.
Which in a sense is almost counterintuitive in an election year, but it makes sense because some of the people at the highest limit were leaving India and going and setting up base in Dubai or Singapore, which is a loss to India. So to that extent, it makes sense. Nilima Jain, I just want to get you to react to some of what we heard from Mukesh Bhutani. It's a bet on growth, and it's a bet on growth led by 2 things. Spend on infrastructure and hope that crowds in private infrastructure spending as well, and do some changes in personal taxation, put money into the hands of the middle classes and hope that they will spend, and that again keeps the economy ticking.
So I'll focus only on the infrastructure bit because I'm looking at it more from the green growth and sustainability perspective, the priority 5 that she laid out. Now, 2 numbers stuck with me. One was the 35,000 plus, for green growth and energy transition. And the other was the credit guarantee for MSMEs. which was about 9,000 crores. Now, we know that India will require a considerable ramp up in investments for achieving its very ambitious clean energy goals. We are looking at almost an outlay of $300 billion over the next 7-8 years. So in terms of that, it's a step in the right trajectory, but it's not enough. And just to zoom in on that 35,000 number, the other number that was announced was 20,700 crore for a 13 gigawatt evacuation transmission system from Leh. Now, just to put things in perspective, India would need at least 140 to 150 gigs of new transfer capacity by 2030, which is almost an outlay of 1.7 lakh crore over the next 7-8 years, right? So it's good that that outlay has been put, but the quantum is very low. And again, coming back to the MSMEs,
Yeah. Nilima, just hold that thought for a minute. We'll just come back to you in a second. I just want to get a reaction also on capital goods and infrastructure in general and that massive infrastructure spending. And who better to talk to than Sunil Mathur of Siemens, which is, of course, one of the largest capital goods companies here. What do you take of this bet? And do you think it's going to happen? Do you think we are going to see a capex cycle in India that's going to take off? Do you think private sector companies are also going to join in? And do you think all of this infrastructure spending will eventually lead to a multiplier in the economy? Absolutely. And I'm sure we all hope, and you in particular hope, that that will be the case.
Absolutely. And I don't think it is something that we will see. It has already started. Indeed, for the last year and a half, capital expenditure from the government has really kicked in. We have seen implementation. We've just won an order of 1,200 locomotives from the Indian Railways. It's a large.
How much did you smile when you said that this is the largest allocation to the railways in, I think, ever?
Well, I think it is probably the case, right? But it's just showing the direction that is actually happening. It's not only a vision of something that is going to happen. We are actually seeing it happening on the ground. From the tender stage to the award stage, for one of the largest locomotive orders in the world, it was only 9 months. And I think these are milestones that we are beginning to see. And I therefore do believe that the 10 lakh outlay will actually happen.
You know, we've seen lots of talks and lots of budgets saying that, oh my God, we're going to see a capex cycle in infrastructure spending. The last major capex boom, in a sense, was what, 2006, 2007, right, roughly then. And then there was almost a decade where nothing much seemed to be happening. Do you think this is now a lasting cycle and we're looking at a 3-4 year period of capex?
I believe so. We've already got visibility, and I can talk for airports, I can talk for railways, I can talk for smart cities. We already see that visibility on the ground. We see tenders already out. We see directions. We are setting up manufacturing facilities already on that basis. So I do believe that it is now here to stay, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, which is what this country desperately needs.
3 to 4 year capex cycle and infrastructure cycle will certainly help transform the country, and so let's hope that happens. Mr. Sunil Mathur, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective, joining us from Siemens. Just want to quickly go across to Harsh Mahajan, who's chair of the FICCI Health Services Committee and also founder of Mahajan Imaging. Dr. Mahajan, your sense on the budget. I mean, obviously healthcare and healthcare spending is something that we often hear a lot of talk about. Was there enough in this budget to make you happy?
Well, thank you for having me with you, Vikram. Actually, this budget, as far as healthcare goes, appears to be more a continuation of what had been done in the past years. There are some new initiatives, especially skilling for nurses, with 157 new nursing colleges to be set up along with existing medical colleges. I think that's a step in the right direction, long overdue, because, we are unable to build more hospitals because of shortage of skilled manpower. I hope that this will also include paramedical staffs, technicians, which are necessary. The government in the last few years has been focusing on specialist doctors, and nearly twice the number are being produced now than were earlier. Also, there is focus on, the tribal areas, 7 crore tribals who have this gene, which leads to sickle cell anemia. And that can be pretty devastating. Today, there is a renewed focus by the government on this, which with gene therapy and CRISPR technology that's available, and which will evolve over time. Actually, the target is 2047 to be able to eliminate sickle cell disease from our country. Then there is some focus, continuing focus on digital health, where out of the 3 centers for excellence in artificial intelligence that are to be built, one of them is going to be in the field of healthcare, and there already AI is making a dramatic impact.
All right. Dr. Mahajan, I'm afraid we have to slip into a break right now. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Nilima, as well. We have to slip into a break. We'll be back in just 3 minutes. Do stay with us.
Priorities of this budget. The budget adopts the following 7 priorities. They complement each other and act as the Saptarishi guiding us through the Amritkal. Inclusive development, reaching the last mile, infrastructure and investment. Coming to 2023-24, the total receipts other than borrowings and the total financial sector. Renewable energy evacuation. The interstate transmission system, electronics, for as a result of various initiatives, integration of 13 gigawatt renewable energy from Ladakh will be constructed with investment of 20,700 crore, including central support of 8,300 crores. In the 75th year of our independence, the world has recognized the Indian economy as a bright star. Our current year's economic growth is estimated to be at 7%. It is notable that this is the highest among all the major economies. This is in spite of the massive slowdown globally caused by COVID-19 and the war. The Indian economy is therefore on the right track. The per capita income has more than doubled to 1.97 lakh rupees. In these 9 years, the Indian economy has increased in size from being 10th to 5th largest in the world. Electronics. As a result of various initiatives of the government, including phased manufacturing program, mobile phone production in India has increased from 5.8 crore units valued at about 18,900 crore in 2014-15 to 31 crore units valued at 2,75,000 crore in the last financial year. To further deepen domestic value addition in manufacturing of mobile phones, I propose to provide relief to customs duty. I propose to provide relief in customs duty on import of certain parts and inputs like camera lens, and continue the concessional duty on lithium ion cells for batteries for another year. Vehicle replacement is an important continuing policy, replacing the old political, replacing, absolutely, thank you. Replacing old polluting vehicles. May be applicable, right? Lab-grown diamonds. Lab-grown diamonds is a technology and innovation-driven emerging sector with high employment potential. These environment-friendly diamonds, which have optically and chemically the same properties as natural diamonds, to encourage indigenous production of LGD, lab-grown diamond seeds and machines, and to reduce import dependency, a research and development grant will be provided to one of the IITs for 5 years. Honorable Speaker, sir, the capital investment outlay is being increased steeply for the third year in a row by 30.
And Deepak Shetty of JCB India Limited, who has a big smile on his face after hearing 10 lakh crore rupees for infrastructure. It's I'm not sure whether even you were expecting that. Daniel Akala also joining us, chief economist at Tresses, is also a well-known author. I'll be coming to you, Daniel, in just a couple of minutes. But if I could just start with you, Saji, healthcare allocations, it's obviously been a really challenging time. And, you know, Bharat Biotech and others with the vaccine have come out. Do you think that the amount of healthcare spending that we've heard is okay, it's justified?
Thank you, Vikram. We, of course, have come out of challenging times, but these challenging times have also shown us that there are many avenues for us to look at with a different lens altogether, because whatever has happened in the past may not be what is going to be sufficient for the future years to come. And with the demographics that we talk about for our country alone, I think the spend, in all aspects, the entire segment of healthcare and life sciences put together, I think we need to look at a much higher scale of spend. We at CII are expecting at least that we would reach about a 2.5 to a 3% spend on the healthcare alone.
It's been going up, right? It's gone from 1.2 to 2.1. So the trajectory is there.
It is going up.
In many other countries, it can be 5%, it can be 7%, it can be 10%.
Right. Of course, right.
So
Certainly.
Your immediate trajectory, you think, is get it up to 2.5?
It is getting there, but we need to build on it. We need to build on this momentum, because we are also looking at a time frame where we are in right now as to we are not only just catering to ourselves in our country with the kind of demographics that we have, but India has also coined the pharmacy of the world. We all know that. So we are looking at other demographics that we are catering to, especially the middle-income countries, the low-middle-income countries, and of course the low-income countries. So we have a large world population out there that is dependent on what we churn out here in terms of
part of that spending, though, that jumped to 2.1 was because of COVID-related spending, right? Now, this year coming forward, and I think few people would have a finger on the pulse of COVID more than you would. Do you think that spending is now going to go? I mean, do you think COVID is more or less over and behind us now?
COVID, we don't know if COVID is still over, but we will continue to watch the variants and the mutations as they are happening. But we are ready as a country. Again, I think we need to also pat ourselves that we have done that huge spend did come about for all the healthcare needs that we needed. Apart from the vaccines, the 2 billion that was procured and distributed countrywide. But I think we are also going to be have to ready ourselves with newer technologies for the new variants, if at all, if they come and if they become stronger. But we hope it won't, because we are hopefully already primed by now. At least most of us have taken the 3 boosters.
So now that I've got you, can I ask you a quick medical question?
Yeah.
Should people have that nasal booster even if they already nasal shot? Even
If it is required, yes, it is better to take it. Yes. Yes, because there are people, again, with multiple comorbidities, age factors, and several other aspects of their own health, which probably sometimes may lower their immune, their own antibodies and the immune titers that they have, because our responses are all different. Your system, responds in a different way, and mine would respond differently.
Yeah.
So in order to, the 3rd shot was important. That was the booster shot, which that's why it's called the booster. But then the 4th shot and the ones later, right now the 4th shot, I think is something which will be very useful for the first responders, for all those,
at
higher risk segment of the population. And those of them who are averse to taking pricks. There are many apparently who have not gone and had that shots at the hospital, because of the fear of the poke. So
Suchitra, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
With that perspective. And
thank you, Vikram.
We'll come back and have a longer discussion on this, because I'm sure people are fascinated.
Thank you, Vikram.
Mr. Shetty, before I come to you, just want to go to Sunil Munjal, who's now joining us. Sunil, that budget, 1.5 hour speech is one of the shortest speeches I've heard. Was there enough bang for the buck there?
Actually, it's interesting you should say this, Vikram. In lesser time and in simpler language, she actually got a lot done in today's speech. It was a simple workman type of a speech. And I think, and I like that, by the way, because for a long time we've been saying, allow this to be a statement of account of the government and not too many policy statements. But we've all got used to policy statements, and there is always expectation. Even if you see the focus on the indirect taxes, it probably was one of the shortest, which to my mind is good, because industry likes continuity. Business wants to work in an environment where they know where they're going. Either you announce long-term changes or you don't keep making changes. And from that point of view, good, but very wide coverage, all the way from artisanal skills to using technology in agriculture to green farming to green fuels to green manufacturing to strengthening manufacturing overall, focus on how do you implement the new education policy by making it more connected to the needs for industry and business. I would say overall a pretty good job done. No great temptation of the elections coming on. The exemptions given to lower income groups would certainly improve liquidity in people's hands and thereby hopefully contribute to consumption improving. Because on the top end, consumption had improved post the big COVID impact, but at the bottom end, it was suffering quite badly. So I'm hoping the impact of this, what she's looking for. Also, the little things like of course, upping the big spend on infrastructure. I'm sure you would have heard from many people as a massive knock-on effect. Picking areas.
How important do you think that was, Sunil? Do you think 10 lakhs? Do you think that 10 lakh number is the right number? It's clearly a bet on growth, right? Spend a lot of money on infrastructure and see what happens. Have that multiplier effect kicking in.
So there are 3 aspects to this. One, is there, could you be doing more? Of course you can. But of course you should be. But you have to balance 2 things. One is the overall numbers in the budget, therefore watching the revenue and fiscal deficit. Second is the capacity to execute. We are gradually building up. Please remember, if you remember our conversation you and I had, and I'm going back about 4 or 5 years ago, that if you double the number of spend on infrastructure, you won't have the capacity. That number would be just a pie in the sky kind of number. So I think the step-by-step approach, and it is, by the way, a 33% increase in the spend, which is not a small amount. The infrastructure has 2 or 3 benefits. One is, while these projects go on, they create lots of consumption and jobs. Post they're getting completed, they improve the overall efficiency and lubricity of people's lives, society, and for industry. And then knock-on effective from the global investor's point of view, this is seen as the right way to spend money. So it benefits us in many different ways. But she's not stuck there alone. She's also gone down to focusing on the startups, although I would have liked to see them address the cap gains on startups as also the ESOP treatment. I think those are 2 misses. But there are just so many things that have been covered in this budget. Overall, quite well done.
All right. Srinivas Majal, thank you for joining us. Overall, well done. A couple of misses, but overall, you thought that was good. Just want to come to Deepak Shetty now, JCB. That infrastructure spending that we have seen. Were you surprised by that, 10 lakh crores?
I would not say surprised, but I'm very happy that there is a continuity. On top of the 36% increase, 7.5 lakh crores outlay last year, which was announced, this is topping up. So it sort of demonstrates the continuity in government's focus on infrastructure development in the country. I also wanted to touch upon, while this will be the headline in the newspaper tomorrow, but there are certain other elements also. The 2.4 lakh crores investment on railways, again, very important. The focus on Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, particularly in the rural hamlets, very important. And last few years, we have struggled with the state government finances. So the 50-year loan to the state government, part of which will certainly be invested in infrastructure, rural infrastructure development. I think all of this very positively talk about government's focus on infrastructure development.
Right. Deepak, if you could just hold that thought. Daniel Lakal is now joining us, chief economist at TESIS. Daniel, if you look at the budget and look at it from outside, it seems to be a gamble or a bet on growth. A multiplier effect will happen. Spend large sums of money on infrastructure, put money into the hands of the middle classes. They'll spend, you'll have infrastructure spending, and put together, growth will go up, and that leads to enough taxation to pay for all of this.
Absolutely. I think that the budget is very pro-growth. If you look at it, it's a reduction in taxes, an improvement in the amount of liquid money in the hands of the middle class and businesses, and a big increase in spending in the things that matter the most, infrastructure in particular, because as we all know, India has a tremendous potential and obviously requires much more investment in infrastructure. And that is the kind of government spending that actually pays back. So one of the interesting things about it is that it may achieve at the same time tax improvement for the vast majority of the population with spending that actually delivers higher growth. So it's a big bet on improving the growth prospects for India, for attracting capital from all over the world. I think that the Prime Minister and the government have an eye on a very important impact that is likely to happen in the next years, which is the amount of capital that may move from China to India. And by that, by investing more in infrastructure and making it easier for investments is certainly something that is going to help reduce the deficit.
All right. Daniel, I'm going to have to interrupt you. The Prime Minister is just speaking. We're going to have to cut across to him and just hear what the Prime Minister...
यानी पीएम विकास करोड़ों विश्वकर्माओं के जीवन में बहुत बड़ा बदलाव लाएगा। साथियों, शहरी महिलाओं से लेकर गांव में रहने वाली महिलाएं हो, कारोबार रोजगार में व्यस्त महिलाएं हो या घर काम में व्यस्त महिलाएं हो, उनके जीवन को आसान बनाने के लिए बीते वर्षों में सरकार ने अनेक विविध कदम उठाए। वर्षों में सरकार ने अनेक विध कदम उठाए हैं। जल जीवन मिशन हो, उज्ज्वला योजना हो, पीएम आवास योजना हो, ऐसे अनेक कदम। इन सबको बहुत बड़ी ताकत के साथ आगे बढ़ाया जाएगा। उसके साथ साथ महिला सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप एक बहुत बड़ा सामर्थ्यवान क्षेत्र आज भारत में बहुत बड़ी जगह अपने हाथ एक्वायर कर चुका है। उनको अगर थोड़ा सा बल मिल जाए तो मिरेकल कर सकते हैं। और इसलिए विमेन सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप उनके सर्वांगीण के विकास के लिए नई पहल इस बजट में एक नया आयाम जोड़ेगी। महिलाओं के लिए एक विशेष बचत योजना भी शुरू की जा रही है और जनधन अकाउंट के बाद ये विशेष बचत योजना सामान्य परिवार की गृहिणी माताओं बहनों को बहुत बड़ी ताकत देने वाली है। ये बजट सहकारिता को ग्रामीण अर्थव्यवस्था के विकास की धुरी बनाएगा। सरकार ने कोऑपरेटिव सेक्टर में दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी अन्न भंडारण योजना बनाई है, स्टोरेज कैपेसिटी। बजट में नए प्राइमरी कोऑपरेटिव्स बनाने के लिए एक महत्वाकांक्षी योजना का भी ऐलान हुआ है। इससे खेती के साथ साथ दूध और मछली उत्पादन के क्षेत्र का विस्तार होगा। किसानों, पशुपालकों और मछुआरों को अपने उत्पाद की बेहतर कीमत मिलेगी। साथियों, अब हमें डिजिटल पेमेंट्स की सफलता को एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर में दोहराना है। इसलिए इस बजट में हम डिजिटल एग्रीकल्चर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की एक बहुत बड़ी योजना लेकर आए हैं। आज दुनिया इंटरनेशनल मिलेट ईयर मना रही है। भारत में मिलेट्स के अनेक प्रकार हैं, अनेक नाम है। आज जब मिलेट्स घर घर में पहुंच रहा है, पूरी दुनिया में पॉपुलर हो रहा है, तो उसका सर्वाधिक लाभ भारत के छोटे किसानों के नसीब में है। और इसलिए आवश्यक है कि नए तरीके से उसको आगे ले जाया जाए। इसकी एक नई पहचान, विशेष पहचान आवश्यक है। इसलिए अब इस सुपर फूड को श्री अन्न की नई पहचान दी गई है। उसके प्रोत्साहन के लिए भी अनेकविध योजनाएं बनाई गई हैं। श्री अन्न को दी गई प्राथमिकता से।
All right, that's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Will of course play the entire speech for you a little later. Continue to get reactions. Radhika Gupta joining us, MD and CEO of Edelweiss Mutual Fund. But before I go to her, Mr. Shetty, you were making one last point on infrastructure.
I think it's one of the important parts of this budget is why the government has focused on short-term infrastructure development, particularly putting this requirement of the state governments that part of the 50-year loan to be utilized in infrastructure development for the year 24. I really welcome this whole announcement on green hydrogen. I think India has a great opportunity to play the world leader role here, and this whole announcement of 30 million metric ton is very positive.
Your mic has suddenly stopped working. I'll just go to Radhika in the meantime and then come back to you. Radhika, how are the markets reacting to all of this, Radhika? I think they are reasonably encouraged, and that means we were just hearing from P and Vijay that by now they'd have caught some fine print. What do you think of the overall reaction of the markets?
Look, I don't think you could have done more. To be honest, everyone's saying it's a short speech. I think while saying very little, she did quite a bit. One is, I think she said the right thing. So you continue to focus on capex and growth while giving the market the comfort around fiscal prudence, which was the big question mark. So you say growth is important, but fiscal prudence is going to happen. And you find a way to spur consumption in the part of the economy where it matters. So you're putting more money into the hands of the people and also directing people towards the new tax regime. So I think that in terms of item one was very important. I think the meta point, which is the second point I would make, is that increasingly we are seeing budgets are showing that India is truly becoming long term. So we are going away from the tendency to be populist in a year before election and continuing our growth path. As a capital markets person, you're recognizing that domestic capital is important in the market, so nobody has tinkered with capital gains taxation. And things like gift, etc., which were good for global investors, you continue to invest. So you're showing that India is really building for the long term. We have a long term vision and strategy, and we're trying to build a stable regime for both domestic and foreign investors. So I think that is a second big plus for me. And the third one is, the thrust on tourism, because I truly believe that that can be a big catalyst in states and from an economic point of view, and the thrust on digital public infrastructure, where I think India has made a tremendous stride.
Radhika,
Go
one
ahead.
specific question, Radhika, I wanted to ask you. This market-linked debentures seems to have been phased out. It's something that many institutions, I don't know, the Edelweiss are doing it, many institutions were doing that. That seems to have gone. Is that correct now?
Yes, it is. Actually, this budget has closed what I would call a couple of regulatory arbitrages as far as investment products are concerned. So, market linked debentures, which had advantageous taxation, now get taxed fully. So, I think that product as an HNI product doesn't become exciting anymore. Insurance, as you would have noticed, the non ULIP part of insurance above 5 lakhs also now is not tax free. So I think that's why you're seeing some impact on life insurance companies. And then, of course, property above 10 crores, if you're doing a large capital gains sale, is impacted. So I think these three big loopholes are actually closed. So by the way, as a mutual fund industry person, I'm very happy because it's a movement towards more regulated financial products.
All right. Radhika, thank you so much for joining us. Before I come back to my guests here, Shashi Tharoor joining us. Shashi, your sense as an opposition leader, how do you react to the budget?
Well, even as I came out of Parliament, I was reacting to the omissions in her speech, that she hadn't mentioned Manrega at all, for example. And now we know why. We've just looked at the budget. They've slashed Manrega down to the lowest sum ever allotted to Manrega, 60,000 crores. And this is at a time when experts as recently as last year were saying that the scheme needed 1.4 lakh crores, and where the government had to come back to us just a couple of months ago with a supplementary demand because their last year's budget estimate was not adequate. Now you've seen them slashing it. It makes no sense at all unless they are being ridiculously optimistic that there will be so many jobs coming out of their present budget that people will not be demanding Manrega work. We find that completely unrealistic. Demand is not that much down. It's certainly better than in the pandemic years, but at the same time, there's no question that they've not even been able to give the amount of days of employment that people have been asking for. So that is a big shocker that they've actually cut that down. Generally speaking, it looks like the social security expenditure of the government is down. And we're looking at examples like the National Social Assistance Program, which is down. The ICDS, the Child Development Scheme budget, is unchanged, which means it's reduced in money in real terms because of inflation. The budget of the Women and Child Development Ministry, same as last year, so again reduced in real terms. Maternity benefits have gone. You're looking at really a disaster for our social security system, except, of course, for the 2 lakh crores they've given for the PMG-KAY, which is the old National Food Security Act that they've renamed. So it doesn't look particularly good from the point of view of those in need in our culture, in our country. And then you look at their priorities. They have also slashed the budget of the Ministry of Minority Affairs, and they've slashed the budget of the Ministry of Labour. And that's very interesting. And they've raised defense only, the capital outlay part, not the salaries and revenue, pensions, but the defense capital outlay has gone up so little that it doesn't even fully account for inflation. So their priorities are clearly with an eye on the election, and good for them. That's what governments, I can't blame them for wanting to do that. But it's certainly...
But Mr. Tharoor, hang on. If I could... But you would have argued that if they did have an eye on the election, then they should have been spending more on what are called populist measures. They should have done... The fact that they have focused on infrastructure and other issues is almost strange in a budget which is 1 year before the election. Because you would have expected a lot more social schemes, populist schemes, MREGA spending, all of that in an election year.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be surprised to see them crawling back to Parliament with supplementary demands, because the amount they've allotted for social security and social welfare is pathetic, as I've already explained. But even on their hiking capital expenditure, Vikram, if you look at this, I mean, I accept the proposition that investments in infrastructure and productive capacity can have a large multiplier impact on growth and employment. But the truth is, when you're estimating 7% growth, that really means you're seeing growth slow down, because the first 6 months of the year, we grew at 9.7%. So if we're ending up at 7 for the whole year, that means we're looking at about 4.5% or thereabouts in the second half of the fiscal year. So to begin with, growth hasn't exactly been stimulated by this government's policy so far. Secondly, if you look at the hike in capital expenditure, even in the last couple of budgets, it's not the first time they've increased capital expenditure, Vikram. They've done in each of the last 2 fiscal years. But many state governments have rightly argued this has come at the cost of a reduction in grants to them. And unemployment has continued to rise. So if it's supposed to have this kind of multiplier effect, why hasn't it worked in the last 2 years? I'm sorry to be coming up with a dampener on
Mr.
it. Some of the assumptions are absurdly optimistic.
All right, Dr. Tharoor, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. Great to hear from you. Okay, Dr. Shetty, sorry, trying to get you to finish that comment you were trying to make.
Yeah, what I was trying to say is that while the government has focused on the present and the near future, I really welcome this whole announcement on green hydrogen. I think it completely lays out the vision for India to be the global leader on the green hydrogen economy, and particularly putting a number of 30 million metric ton per annum, I think is very, very positive.
All right, Mr. Reddy, I know you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you for having me on your show. Go ahead.
So just wanted to get your sense, though, on the budget, major highlights and specifically from your sector.
So therefore, I'll probably switch between what the investments are. What I think they did very progressive is talk more about digital. For example, they have now gone ahead and created 3 centers of excellence for artificial intelligence. And they're creating 100 5G labs in engineering colleges. All this is very futuristic. We are now making investment in education. Our education budget has also gone up by 10%. And what we are seeing, therefore, is that we truly are believing that India could potentially become the knowledge economy of the world. So therefore, emphasis is on education. Associated with them is also skills at this point of time. Skills, apprenticeship, industry focus, all that are together in the budget, which makes it very forward-looking to me.
All right, so forward-looking, and they've done enough, you think? Yeah. All right, Viren Shetty now joining us, Executive Director, Narayana Health, and Mohandas Pai is also joining us. So I'm just going to jump from one to the other. Mr. Shetty, what do you think of the budget? Your snap reaction.
One of the headline things that was put out is the announcement of 167 nursing colleges in what I think will be built on the premises of existing medical colleges. While this is a good announcement because there's a massive shortage of nurses in India and we expect a huge amount of emigration from our country to the foreign countries because of their shortfall in nurses, this probably could go further if they were to liberalize on the nursing license allowances. There are thousands of applications pending for nursing colleges to be set up, including our group across state governments across the country, where there's enough and more demand for it. And the government should spend, but also allow the private sector to spend on setting up nursing and medical colleges, as well as make it simpler to set up these colleges. And that will go a long way towards addressing our manpower deficits.
So if you look at the basic thrust, we were just hearing this, there is a lot being said on skilling, on acquiring the specific areas of talent that are required. Healthcare seems to be increasingly becoming one of those areas, not just IT software, which India should aspire to. Do you think that's a correct way to approach it?
Absolutely. See, it doesn't depend on raw material. The only raw material you need for developing a world-class healthcare and education sector is people. And we have no shortage of people. And we are the most hungry to learn people on the entire planet. You look at any country, the highest educated cohort of immigrants happen to be Indians. So there's a huge desire to learn, but it is hamstrung by a lot of regulations that prevent us from building a very vibrant educational and skilling sector. Now, we've allowed and opened up our gates to foreigners. Okay, great. We should have the Harvard and Stanfords of the world set up in India.
But what about the thousands of Indian entrepreneurs that want to set up colleges? Right now, you're not allowed to create for-profit education institutions. If you want to create a medical college, you need 30 acres of land, you need hospital, you need badminton courts, you need a lot of things that are not necessary for a modern education system. So yes, it is a step in the right direction, but I believe a lot more can be done by harnessing the local availability of capital resources and ability to spend to cater to Indians who otherwise are going abroad for education.
3 centers of excellence for artificial intelligence will be set up in top educational institutions. Current year's economic growth is estimated to be at 7%. The Indian economy is therefore on the right track. The capital investment outlay is being increased steeply by 33% to 10 lakh crores. Free food grain to all Antyodaya and priority households for the next 1 year. I propose to increase the rebate limit to 7 lakh in the new tax regime. The fiscal deficit is estimated to be 5.9% of the GDP. This budget builds on our focus on green growth. Priorities of this budget. The budget adopts the following 7 priorities. They complement each other and act as the Saptarishi guiding us through the Amritkal. Inclusive development, reaching the last mile, infrastructure and investment, unleashing the potential, green growth, youth power, and financial sector. Renewable energy evacuation. The interstate transmission system for evacuation and grid integration of 13 gigawatt renewable energy from Ladakh will be constructed with investment of 20,700 crores, including central support of 8,300 crores. In the 75th year of our independence, the world has recognized the Indian economy as a bright star.
Sherpa for G20 and therefore a person who can tell us how this fits into India's priorities. But Mohandas Pai now joining us. Mohandas, what did you make of that? Short speech, but there was a reasonable amount in it.
Well, I think it's a transformative budget because of many reasons. First, social security spending has increased. I heard Shashi Tharoor nitpick But he's a nitpicker of the extreme order where he picks up some small things and spends because he doesn't understand that budget is based upon spending of the previous year. Even though you allocate, they'll allocate more. But overall, I think in the last 10 years, Prime Minister Modi has made sure that almost all Indians have the necessities of life, a roof over the head, water in the tap, power in the switch, a toilet in the house, a gas stove, food on the table, medical insurance, money in the bank, a bank account, a mobile connection, education for children, etc. That is unbelievable. That has transformed the country, and the allocation for housing and water is very high, and that's very good. Allocation for health is pretty good. I think overall social spending is good. Infrastructure, you've seen an increase, that is very good, because infrastructure will drive investment, increase productivity, reduce the barriers to increase competition because the supply chain costs are very high. So road and railway network will be massively improved. I think that's fantastic. And the third thing which I've seen is that many of the reforms in terms of reducing compliances, reducing the criminal barriers, criminal charges for small transgressions, and reducing the hold of these bureaucrats is pretty good. On the income tax, I think, Vikram, has been very disappointing because they should commit a radical move to have a 3 slab. Yeah.
Mohandas Bhai, I'm going to have to interrupt you for just a couple of minutes. Amitabh Kant just joining us live on this, so I'll just come back and talk to you again. But let me just go across to Amitabh Kant because as Sherpa, Mr. Kant, thank you so much for joining us on this. As Sherpa for G20, this is an important budget. Have you got enough to talk to the rest of the world about, Mr. Kant, and to tell them why you think India is going to continue to be the brightest space on the global economic map?
So, Vikram, I really think that this is a budget for a new India. It's a budget for new India because the most important thing is that this is going to be a very major catalyst for infrastructure growth, which is very, very important because that has huge multiplier impact. So if you're putting close to about 10 lakh crores and 3 years running, you are increasing it. That's a very, very major driver. Secondly, in my view, this budget will be a major driver of the consumption story of India, which was very important because on the direct tax side, the budget does several things which will put a lot of resources into the hands of the consumers, and the consumers are going to spend. And that will going to create a virtuous cycle of growth, which will enable, expenditure in the economy to take place. This was very necessary to take capacity utilization up in the economy. Thirdly, I think what is very important is that this roadmap from 6.4 to 5.9 this year, and announcing that over a medium-term period, you will bring the fiscal deficit down to 4.5. It's important because this will bring in private sector investment. This will enable private sector to borrow and invest in the economy. And that is important because if you look at the period from 2000 to 2010, private sector investment was at a rates of about 25 to 30%. And that is what needs to be brought back. That is really the key. Fourth thing in this budget I find really remarkable is that it pushes for digitization across the economy, across every single sector. It is a very, very tech-driven budget. It focuses on 3 artificial intelligence centers at different IITs. It pushes for 100 labs for 5G. It pushes for ease of doing business. And the other big story is its massive focus on green growth in terms of battery storage, pump storage. It lays huge emphasis. It lays focus on energy transition. And if India goes digital, if India goes green, India will be the first economy in the world which will industrialize without carbonizing. And that is really the big story. So to my mind, this is an amazing budget. And this is a budget looking at the future. This budget really looks at how to push the trajectory of growth. This budget also looks very strongly at the social sectors. It looks at social sectors like it focuses on technology in agriculture. It looks at 500 aspirational blocks, and it makes a major dent in those areas. But one major area where the budget makes a huge impact is urbanization, which to my mind is critical, because municipal bonds, allowing
Mr.
cities
Kant?
to use their resources, all these are critical.
Mr. Kant, you just spoke about the social sector. Now, it's interesting because this is in many ways the last budget before the election next year. The focus seems to be more on what industry would have wanted. The focus is a lot on infrastructure spending, encouraging growth, and not so much in areas like MREGA and other things, which would be called more the social schemes. Does that mean that it's really a bet on growth that the government is making?
No, the budget does a great job of focusing on infrastructure. It focuses on growth, but it also takes care of agriculture. If 42% of your economy is of the working population is in agriculture, so it looks at that sector very strongly. It looks at, if you look at the 100 critical transport infrastructure projects, for instance, the last mile connectivity projects, a lot of them are in semi-urban areas, tier 2, tier 3 cities. And when you say states and cities will be encouraged to undertake urban planning reforms and actions to transform our cities, a lot of migration is taking place in these cities. So you are actually what the country needs today is taking care of the urban poor as well, which is very importantly spelled out. But I think there's a huge amount of focus on women development, which is very well required. If India is to grow today, there are more women than men in India. And therefore, if you need a huge focus on women, there's a huge focus on agriculture as well. There's a huge focus on millet. I've never seen a budget with so much of focus on one single crop, which is millet. So it's mind-boggling. But what it clearly spells out is that's looking for transformation, because millets, again, the focus is because you want to reduce the use of water in agriculture sector. So very progressive and forward-looking, I would say.
All right. Mr. Kant, we are very privileged to have Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee also sitting here, Director General CI. He's had a smile on his face, I think, since he walked inside. I think he likes the budget. He may have a comment or a question for you.
No, my question, or rather a comment to Mr. Kant would be, he is the Sherpa, the G20 Sherpa, and today, and that's a huge opportunity for India this year. So what would he see as a couple of key messages that he will carry to the global community on India's, from this budget, about the attractiveness of India as a destination to get more investments, and attractiveness of India more capital, and what is India giving to the world, to the G20 from this budget? What really comes out from, I mean, he must have got some 3 or 4 important talking points for him for this year.
Comment that you've made, and let me spell out a few. Firstly, it highlights the transformational focus, the political will to take India to a new era of growth. It demonstrates the political will of the government to build a new India. It demonstrates the huge commitment to accelerate the pace of growth through capex expenditure and enhancing it very, very substantially. It also demonstrates that India wants to build really top-class quality infrastructure through airports, through railways. Look at railways, 2.4 lakh crores, outlay for railway. That's almost a 500% jump over what it had in 2013-14, and roads, highways, etc. It also focuses very strongly on travel and tourism. 50 tourism destinations to be selected through a challenge route. And secondly, that it wants to build an India which will be a decarbonized India. It wants to build an India which will be totally digital. So you are technologically pole vaulting through this budget. That is a big thing. And also it says that you are talking about 1 crore farmers to adopt natural farming and putting in at 1,000 bio input resource centers. So all in all, it's a budget for a green future. It's a budget for huge amount of technological leapfrogging. And that's what makes it an extraordinary budget.
All right, Mr. Kant, thank you so much for joining us. We won't take up more of your time, but it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much. And we're glad you got talking points for the G20 Sherpa meetings. You'll have a lot to tell them as you've just told us. Thank you so much, Mr. Kant, for joining us. Right, Mr. Banerjee, so overall, look, you always smile. Every time I've ever seen you after a budget, you've always smiled, so that's not necessarily an indication as to how happy you are. How happy are you actually?
You know, if one looks at what one was talking about just 24 hours back, most of what we were talking about in terms of asks have been tick marked, and that is what one is happy about. What I particularly would like to underline is I see that there are some important facets in the budget which really will define the growth path or the developmental path for the next few years for India to be a developed economy. And I say that because I see focus on many areas which like sustainable living, ease of living, looking at for the focus when we talk about the townships, we talk about even moving away from certain traditional ways that one has been functioning. So I see that trend. There's a very overall macro sort of a view. But second, one was sort of cautiously optimistic about before the budget was whether we will see the continued focus on capex, and I use the word cautiously optimistic, and we did find the finance minister really being very aggressive on it, and that's great. You see, if you compare if you read it with the economic survey of yesterday, you see that the credit offtake in certain areas, even the MSMEs, that's taken off 30% increase. Now, all of that is not going in OPEX, right? Some of it is going into CAPEX. So, obviously, private sector has started coming in. There is expansion in investment. So, this bet on really focusing more on CAPEX has paid off. And I think private sector investments have started and private sector investment will increase. But very importantly, in that section, what I found interesting is asking the states to increase capex and giving that space to the states because through the that 50-year.
Yeah.
So that's important. And the consumption demand, of course, all of us are happy. Everybody is happy. I would think that she has looked after all sections of.
We're just going to ask Mr. Sanjeev Puri, who's come in and joined us. Just in a sec, I'm going to ask you exactly that same question because you would know about consumption demand and what's actually happening out there. But before I come to you, Mohandas Pai still with us. Mohandas, you were making a final point about some of the things that you think are unfinished agenda and which you would still have liked to have got done before we went across to Amitabh Kant. Do you want to finish making the point you were making?
Yeah, the point I want to make is, urbanization is key to India's growth. Because please remember, urbanization creates concentration of human activity, concentration creates specialization, specialization increases productivity, that increases income. India has not invested in our towns because we have this misplaced notion that India is a country of villages, which is not true. Farmers don't want to stay in villages, they're immigrating. So the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, where you have that urban infrastructure fund like you have for the rural side, where priority sector shortfalls can be put into the fund is very good, along with the change in planning. I think that's very good. And the focus ultimately on making sure more jobs are being created. Vikram, we really must bust this myth about jobless growth and increasing unemployment that Shashi Tharoor always talks about. If you look at the EPFO, more than 9 lakh new people join the EPFO every month and make a social contribution, out of which 55% are below the age of 25. They're all new jobs. Now we are creating 1 crore to 1.15 crore new jobs as per the EPFO every single year. Yes, the salaries there are low because it's not going beyond 20 for about 80%. The balance are going up. So the mix of increasing unemployment should be shot down. What we need is higher income for these people. And for that, it will only come if we have greater development in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities and in rural areas. So that block development chosen under the aspirational block scheme is very good. And I think what is missing is a scheme for the big cities. You know, we need a big cities. You can't ignore Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, and grow this country. I think that is the missing piece.
All right, Mr. Pai, we're gonna have to leave it there. We're running flat out of time, just about to end. Mr. Sanjeev Puri is also coming to join us. But thank you. I think we've got your broad thing, and I think we should continue to discuss some of these in more details. Mohandas Pai, thank you so much for joining us. Sanjeev Puri now coming in to join also, Vice President at CII. He was just talking about the consumption story. Enough been done for that, you think?
Absolutely. Ultimately, consumption is a function of jobs getting created, of economic activity getting a boost, and of people having more money in their hands. So I think if you look at the budget, I would say it is progressive, growth-oriented, inclusive. It is also very prudent and very consistent. It reflects a consistent thinking process and vision that we saw in prior budgets. So all of these ingredients are really good for economic activity. And I heard CB call out.
But do you see the main push coming from the infrastructure side or from consumption or both in the coming year?
Ultimately, they all, what does infrastructure do? Infrastructure is on one hand going to make the economy competitive. On the other hand, it also creates jobs. And in turns, enhances capacity utilization, in turns it spurs further investment and job creation. So it's a virtuous cycle is getting created, right?
Yeah.
So that's why this, it's so important. And as CB said, we see silver lining of private investment kicking in. So with capacity utilizations already up and all these economic multipliers coming in, we would expect that also to progressively increase, and the both together will have a good multiplier effect on the economy. So that's one part of it, but that's not the only piece that's going to spur consumption. I think there are many important interventions in the budget. To take the example of tourism, we know what potential India has got in tourism. It's immense. India has so much to offer. From natural beauty to religious sites to heritage sites to cuisine to nature-based tourism. India has much to offer.
And it's good to see that getting some attention now.
So to create it, in the form of focused interventions with 50 places, with a integrated development and promoting it, I think that's a very sharp approach. And we know that the economic multipliers in tourism are phenomenal. So all of these are just examples on what will spur consumption ultimately.
All right. Mr. Banerjee, it's been said, and I think correctly said, that the budget should not be the end of the process. It's not supposed to be excitement. This is part of the process. So for you, it's going to be another year of going on, pushing the government in the right direction so the economy moves. What are the unfinished items on your agenda, and what would you like to continue to push the government to do?
So, there are lots of things that we would have to really take on from this budget. What's been happening, and what I've been noticing there is a process. I mean, there is a sort of this budget is a build up on the budget of last year, is a build up on the budget of the year before last. So there would be many boxes which will keep getting ticked. Reforms processes have been started off. So I would like to really push for more state level reforms. One of the things that is which has really resulted in India is the story of GST, where GST Council has really worked with the states to come to a consensus. So when we talk about reforms, which was touched upon in the budget, say for instance, power sector, land, agriculture, labor, all of this would need to include states. And this next story of India is really the states of India. And I think that was one important agenda that one would push. The second very important agenda is we should not give up on ease of doing business or cost of doing business, which includes decriminalization. Today what we have seen, a lot has been done on ease of doing business. but we need to do much more. There is it's half empty, half full type. And again, over here there is a lot that the states should do. National single window schemes. Prime Minister himself has spoken about decriminalization, and I think decriminalization itself can be a game changer for India, for doing business in India.
I'm going to book you for a special session or special program just on this to take that particular thought forward, because you're right, it needs to be done. But Mr. Puri, Mr. Banerjee, thank you both so much for joining us. Both of you look very happy with the budget, as good as it could have been expected.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
All right, so with that, smiles on both their faces, we're going to leave this particular analysis, and we are going to get Mr. Banerjee to come back with a lot more on the unfinished agenda, what he still would like to see done. You'll see that on the India Story, hopefully in a week or two from now. But that's it for this special program on the budget. India Story is at 8:30 this evening. Do remember to watch that.